Jujutsu Kaisen Chapter 233 review. And if you like JJK and other anime content, subscribe for more. So we are coming off last week's cliffhanger of Gojo being caught by Mahoraga after black flashing Sukuna. And we opened up this chapter with Gojo taking a step back from Mahoraga as Yuji says he is not finished yet. We then have Shoko saying that Gojo's healing is clearly taking longer and this must be due to brain damage, and it is likely the same case for Sukuna. And it is most certainly the same case, which we will see later. And then we get some interesting narration saying that going up against the King of Curses, the strongest in history, everybody thought there was a possibility that Gojo would lose. And that thought is flooding their minds, and the same thought is flooding Gojo's. But unlike them, Gojo thinks back to Toji, and he is flooded with a more intense thought than the signs of defeat, which is satisfaction. And I want to take a note here that when everyone is watching Mahoraga and thinks, damn, Gojo might lose, Yuji was the only one to have full confidence in Gojo and say, no, he's not finished. And even though we see the doubt is in his mind as well, he is never going to give up on Gojo, and I love that. And like Sukuna before him, Gojo goes for the age-old tactic of punch Mahoraga in the face. He then proceeds to shove it into a corner, and Mahoraga looks just like it's in timeout. And we then get Gojo reciting incantations to bring back his decreased output. And I want to note something here. One of these incantations is Paramita, which means transcendent action or perfection in Buddhism. And usually this term is associated with enlightened beings, but in Jujutsu Kaisen, we know that Tengen is the one who preached Buddhism and the foundations of Jujutsu in Japan. And Buddhism being directly name-dropped, I think that's pretty interesting, especially now that we have Gojo using Buddhist terms to bring back the output for his cursed energy in his curse technique. And while this is not the first Buddhist reference we've got in relation to cursed energy, it sounds like they're fundamentally linked, and I think this is probably related to the true nature of cursed energy, especially when we take into account things like angels saying reincarnated sorcerers themselves are against God's will. So I'm curious to see how deep this will go the further we get into JJK. And after using this incantation, Gojo tries to use the red reversal to blow apart Mahoraga in one shot, but Sukuna saves it with rapid escape. And Gojo comments on Sukuna resting up because a lot of people last week thought that Sukuna was going to be asleep, but like Gojo, his RCT is slow, so it probably took him longer to recover. But walking away from a blue-red black flash while he's been the one using RCT this whole time, that is ridiculous durability. And Gojo notes that Mahoraga is on offense while Sukuna is playing support for defense. And Sukuna throws a fire extinguisher that he uses as a smoke screen to jump Gojo with Mahoraga. And then we see Sukuna clap his hands together to do a piercing blood with Max Elephant's water. This utterly shocks Choso, and it makes sense why he can do this and why he would do this, and that piercing blood is one of the fastest attacks in JJK, and blood is like 90% water already, so piercing water, that makes a lot of sense. And as far as battle IQ is concerned, Sukuna really is just Jujutsu Taskmaster. And then we get the reveal from Gojo that Sukuna cannot use his technique Shrine simultaneously with 10 Shadows unless he imbues it into his domain. So a lot of people were saying that this fight felt like 10 Shadows versus Limitless, and it doesn't just feel like that, that's literally what it is. 10 Shadows is not a contingency or a backup, it was Sukuna's plan the entire time. From the first domain battle to now, it has been the wheel. And this brings up a lot of questions, and I'm going to take this as semi-confirmation that Gojo is probably going to fucking annihilate some Shikigami. Because once Mahoraga is dead and the wheel is gone, now we know he can't use them simultaneously, so if he has something for infinity in his technique, that is when he would pull it out. Because if he does have something this entire fight, he couldn't have used it anyways. And speaking of pulling out things, he pulls out a brand new totality with the Chimera Beast Agito, and this thing looks like it has all 9 Shikigami totalitied inside of Nu. Maybe all 10, because I don't know any others that are bipedal besides Mahoraga. But I'm going to assume that there's no Mahoraga in this, because this is probably how a normal 10 Shadows user is supposed to tame Mahoraga. You have your own Mahoraga at home, and you craft your Walmart brand version, and then you use it to exercise the original Shikigami in the ritual. And then Sukuna says it's a 3-on-1 standing between the 2 giant Shikigami, and Gojo says you look like a lost child. Gojo still here with the attitude, and Sukuna is kind of smiling. Maybe he thought it was funny. And then this fight devolves into the classic Jump Kaisen, with Gojo being triple teamed by Sukuna. And while Gojo is flying through the air trying to dodge these two giant Shikigami, Sukuna pops out in his shadow and tries to piercing squirt gun him. Gojo sees this and tries to whack-a-mole him with a Falco punch as Sukuna backflips away. And while the two Shikigami are trying to double punch Gojo, Gojo jumps onto the back of Mahoraga and pops a red reversal right into it. Gojo notes it was effective, but not effective enough, and he starts to wonder if Mahoraga's adaptation is gradual instead of a 0 to 100. And this is the second time in 2 chapters that the Mahoraga's adaptation rules have been brought up, so I'm guessing there's going to be a reveal around this, and once Gojo figures out how the adaptation works, he's going to kill Mahoraga. And Gojo says, well, I guess I'll have to use that, even if Sukuna will take notice, with my unlimited hollow technique. And that's what we got in this chapter, and I'm expecting next week we're going to have his maximum. There is no break again, thank God. This is the first time in months we have had 3 chapters in a row. And I saw some people disappointed that the Black Flash did not have Sukuna on his ass the entire chapter. Let's not downplay the Black Flash. The Black Flash is the most damaging thing Gojo has done to Sukuna this entire time outside of brain damage. And I get people were confused because a lot of people were like, oh, he had white eyes and his wheel fell off. But, well, first of all, the wheel was used in a surprise attack, and white eyes has happened before and not meant knocked out. If you're knocked out, you're not standing up, and you're definitely not summoning Shikigami. And if you do get knocked out, your Shikigami vanishes. Unless you're in suspended death within an exorcism ritual, and this was not that. Sukuna summoned Mahoraga after the Black Flash. There is no statement on a binding vow. We see him standing up, and then we see him standing up. Every single time someone else passes out in this series, they are on their ass, because that is what happens when you are knocked out. That being said, Gojo's Black Flash did put Sukuna out of commission, where he had to recover himself for a period of time. As for Chimera Beast Agito and Mahoraga, these things are going to die, or at least one of them will, because there's no way the Shikigami in this fight are all going to survive. And in this chapter, we get Gojo mentioning Shrine, so it sounds like he knows what the technique is, or at least part of it. I'm guessing Angel told him, because even though the 6 eyes are a little inconsistent on seeing techniques, I doubt they can see letters. Did he just get like a little pop-up on his HUD when he looked at Sukuna that said Shrine? Notable abilities is worse than 10 Shadows. And we're going to see Sukuna's technique eventually, and either it's going to have its own way past infinity, or Gojo's infinity will be gone from exhaustion. Because these two are starting to hit their limit, and it's not just Gojo. We see that even Sukuna, after the Black Flash, he is more scuffed up than he was at the start of the fight when he RCT'd. There are limits to how long you can go on fighting at your max capacity, and I think it's interesting that incantations are used to bring back your output. And I like this because it brings a more supernatural element to Curse Energy, and it's always been supernatural, but it's not just a bodily function. You have to do chants just to bring it about. Incantations, hand signs, and chants, I think it's really interesting that these things are required to function at full capacity. And on the note of full capacity, some people are downplaying the red of Gojo, saying it can't one-shot Mahoraga because it didn't in this chapter. Gojo wasn't at full output, and even if he was and it didn't kill it in one shot, Gojo would probably do enough damage that he himself could finish it off. Similar to how Sukuna opened up Malevolent Shrine, put Mahoraga on its knees, and then finish it off with a fire arrow. And I thought Gojo was going to do consecutive Black Flashes on Mahoraga after the previous statements in the last chapter, but I guess the slash across his upper chest took him out of the zone, which, I mean, that's fair enough. And I think these past 2 chapters have been excellent. I think the pacing is so much better than it was in the domain battle. These chapters are flowing so well, the artwork is great, and we're also just getting so many new parts of these techniques because I think that's what a lot of people wanted. There were a lot of people who thought the domain battle was really boring, and I'll be honest, I'm not the biggest fan. I think it went on 2 chapters too long, and after rereading it about 30 more times, I still think it went on too long. And that's why I like the Gojo Black Flash so much, in that you can see on the reactions of other characters and Sukuna that this is a damaging hit. This punch broke the internet for a reason versus this punch, which was, 2 seconds later, who cares? While with the Black Flash, I can see that this impacted Sukuna even in this chapter. I'm sure you've all heard the term show, don't tell, and the Black Flash, I think that's exactly what this fight needed. But that's just my opinion, and I want to hear yours. What do you think of this fight? What do you think of Gojo versus the Shikigami, and what do you think the future of it is going to look like? Let me know in the comments below. And if you like content like this, subscribe for more. And as always, thanks for watching.